Welcome, everybody, to the Hero's Journey podcast. I'm your host, Frank, and I am currently here with Mike Simon, Somatic coach. And today we're going to be talking about Mike's journey as a coach and really what it means to be a Somatic coach. So, Mike, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Frank.
Mm-hmm.
Glad to be here. So, yep, I'm Mike Simon. I am based in the UK, London specifically. And somatics, I guess we'll probably go into it a bit more, but as a high level, the word somatic derives from the Greek word soma, which means or could be translated to of the body. And so
Oh.
somatic coaching, not to be conflated with somatic therapy, which I'll kind of speak on that a little bit soon. Well, somatic
Mm-hmm.
coaching is very much about working with the whole person. So
Mm.
when I'm working with a client, it's not solely about what they are experiencing and navigating in their mind, in their thoughts. It's also about what they are experiencing in their body. So it's a both
Oh,
and.
all right.
More traditional coaching tends to steer towards the mental plane, how you're
Mm-hmm.
thinking about what you're feeling, your beliefs mentally. It's very much above the shoulders, or above the neck,
Mm-hmm.
depending on which way you want to look at it. But I invite clients that I'm working with to really slow down, to really
Mm.
touch in with how they're feeling, because based on the somatic sort of principles and my belief through the training that I've had, every thought or most thoughts have a correlating feeling attached to that.
Mm.
So you don't just think that you're overwhelmed, you feel overwhelmed.
Mm.
You don't just
Interesting.
think that you're an imposter syndrome. You feel that sense of,
Of
being
course.
an imposter. You don't just think that you're stuck, you feel it. And what I do is that I invite those that I work with to really connect with that feeling or those
Mm-hmm.
feelings as opposed to running away from them. And in doing so, there's a lot more that is unlocked that is
Mm-hmm.
outside the thinking mind. And that is where, the deep, powerful, potent transformations take place. So yeah, somatic coaching, I would
Mm.
say, it's a holistic way of working
Of course.
in the coaching field. It's all encompassing. Everything is welcome in the space, and I look at working with the person and not just the problem.
Yeah, I mean, that's wonderful, really, because for the longest time, it's always been ordinary life coaches who just tell you, okay, you need to do this, this, and this. Here's the way you need to fix your mindset. But I really do enjoy the way that somatic coaching does it, because it's not just, about what's in your mind sometimes. Sometimes, like, I get what you mean by, like, you feel imposter syndrome, you feel, sometimes these negative feelings. It's sometimes never just mind thing. It's more of throughout your whole body you kind of feel this drag. So I'd
Mm.
say that's the benefit of somatic coaching for sure. It's wonderful to hear your explanation on it, especially since you're the one that practices it and teaches others on how to do it.
Yeah,
So something I do want to ask, since it is a pretty unique field of coaching, what got you into it in the first place?
yeah, it's a great question. And I always share that me getting into this space that I'm operating in as a coach was never
Mm-hmm.
intentional in the sense that I never set out to
Mm.
seek and become a somatic coach. I feel that I was very much called to doing what I'm doing now
Oh.
because of my past experiences. So, kind of given a few timestamps or a few, yeah, like micro moments. Excuse me. I
Mm-hmm.
went to therapy. I had some stuff to sort out, man. That's the honest truth. So I went to
Of course.
therapy, and prior to that, though, I had a nervous breakdown in my mid 20s.
Mm.
But I never did anything about that experience. I never sought
Oh.
support, and there was many things going on in my life at that time. But I very clearly remember this aversion to going to therapy. Many thoughts were
Mm-hmm.
going through my mind. Well, I haven't got the money to be consistent with therapy. I don't really need therapy. Maybe it was just
Mm-hmm.
a panic attack. Maybe I was smoking too much. All of these different reasons to steer me away from seeking professional help. And then many years later, a few situations took place which I guess reopened the wounds of what I had
Oh.
experienced in the past. And I
Mhm.
realized, and it was even brought to more attention from my partner, that if I didn't do something to help myself, I probably wouldn't be okay, you know, in
Mhm.
in various different ways.
Of
Like I just
course.
wouldn't be I wouldn't be okay. I've got a son. I'm in a relationship,
Mm-hmm.
I've got a stepson, and it's like I knew something had to change. So I went to therapy for 12 weeks, and yeah, it was extremely healing, extremely
Mm.
necessary for where I was at that time. Also, around that time, I was very interested in working with men in some way, shape, or form.
Interesting.
And I created a subscription box business which was catered to men, specifically
Mm.
grooming products for men, in the hope
Oh.
to cultivate conversations around men's mental health. So I called the subscription box service
Mm-hmm.
the Men Toolbox, the Men Toolbox, a play on
Mm.
words about mental toolbox, men. I like to kind of the creative side
Mm-hmm.
of plays around with words in that way. And yeah, that was enjoyable. Not the best business model, especially because I was only
Mm-hmm.
doing quarterly. Yeah, quarterly. So every 3 months I was doing a new box. It just wasn't working
Mm.
well at all. And to be able to transition to something more frequent, like monthly, would have required a lot of investment for me to get the products, despite the fact that I didn't have that many subscribers. So that was short
Mm-hmm.
lived. And then there was something in me that was seeking for something else. I didn't know what it was, but I knew I wanted to help
Mm-hmm.
people. I knew I wanted to be able to support men at that time anyway, in some sort of way. I considered, becoming a therapist myself. I
Mm.
considered, somehow getting into the legal field in terms of supporting dads that go through family court, because
Mm.
that was the catalyst, the moment that
Of course.
brought more to my awareness that I needed to seek support because of going through
Mm-hmm.
that period, right? And yeah, I was navigating a few things, and nothing was really sticking. And then I
Mm.
somehow stumbled across coaching and found that that could be an option for me to explore. So
Mm-hmm.
I was binge listening to podcasts on Spotify whilst I was delivering pizza in the evenings as a second job. So
Mm.
I would have my Spotify playing, be delivering pizzas, listening to coaching podcasts. And the more I listened to coaching podcasts, I started to realize that this is actually a thing. You could actually earn money from this. And that was never the pull. It was never about
Of
the
course.
money. Of course, I want to make money, but that was not the driver. It was definitely more so
Mm-hmm.
I want to help people in some sort of way. I didn't know how. Coaching just seemed to work quite well.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a background in dance, so I've always facilitated spaces and
Mm-hmm.
brought people together. I've always kind of had those skills behind me. Although coaching is not teaching directly, I've always
Mm-hmm.
worked with people in that sort of way. And so
Oh.
I did,
All right.
yeah, listen to the podcast, enrolled on a very, very low cost coaching self guided course from Udemy. It was literally like $40. I saw it, I bought it. And the reason I did that is because whilst I was seeing some interest in coaching, I didn't know if it was definitely going to be something for me, and therefore was
Mm-hmm.
hesitant to invest without sort of kind of trying it out. So I did the $40
Of
course,
course.
went through that, got my little downloaded PDF. It's like, yeah, I'm a
Mm-hmm.
coach. Changed my Instagram at the time, changed my bio to reflect the fact that I'm a coach.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, even then it was still very strange because I would then see
Mm-hmm.
many coaches on social media, and it just seemed very different to what I was led to believe coaching was. It was very
Of
much,
course.
it felt a lot more teaching, a lot more here. This is what I've done. Do this. You'll be able to make X amount of money. Do this. I'll help you
Mm-hmm.
make £10,000 in 60 days. Do this. And so it just felt a bit weird. And then I would get a lot of DMs from coaches who coach coaches to be better coaches, and it just felt very predatory, and I didn't
Mm-hmm.
like it. But I thought that was what this was about, right? Anyway, moving on, I was navigating. Still, there was loads of emotions, like emotional residue, because of what I had experienced going to therapy, going to court, not really knowing what else I could do and how I could, I guess, really funnel my passion to help people in the right direction.
Mm. Okay.
So I continued to look for other courses. I considered doing a master's degree in dance movement psychotherapy. I opted against that because I didn't want to do 3 years of studying and invest such a large amount of money at that point of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And then I stumbled across the school where I trained as a somatic coach at,
Mm.
and everything just spoke to me. Like the website was clean and clear, the representation, the language. Although I didn't know what
Mm.
semantics was, it's something in me was resonating with what I was reading. So I soon after I started my training with them. That was like a
Oh, all
6 to 7 month training, and yeah, here I am now. There's other things that I did in the way. I did some
course.
training as a Reiki practitioner because I wanted to. I had an experience with my partner that was quite emotionally heightened. The
Mm-hmm.
space was being held, both of us were present, and there was a lot of emotion circulating. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought to myself, well, based on what I now know at that time about coaching, if I'm going to have people that are coming to me with their problems that might
Mm-hmm.
be quite emotionally heavy, I need to be. I've got the language now. This is not the language I had before, but I can say now I need to be resourced well enough
Mm,
to hold space for what they bring to the session. And yeah, I
mm,
can say that now because I've got the language and the understanding about
of
being
course.
resourced to be able to hold space for someone and all of their
Mm-hmm.
parts, right? Because it is challenging. It can be challenging,
Of
especially if
course,
you're
yeah.
not regulated, not only for yourself, but also the person on the other side, based
Mm-hmm.
on co-regulation that can be picked up. So if I was flapping around, just doing a lot, the other person would feel that, even though we're
Of course, yeah.
miles away, on cameras, we're not in the same space. That I guess sort of that transference, that energy,
Mm-hmm.
the elements in the field can be felt. So yeah, I can never answer that question that you gave to me about kind of like how I got into coaching in a simple, short way.
Mm-hmm.
I always have to give the detail, the story,
Of
the origin,
course.
because it was not, hey, I want to be a coach today. Okay, let me find a coach. Like it really wasn't that. It was a series of events that led me to the door, you know, and to be curious enough to open the door and see, okay, what's behind this door? What does this mean? And things just
Mm-hmm.
started to marry. So, like I've said briefly, my dance background, I know my body from a performative
Of course.
perspective. So then when I
Mm-hmm.
stumbled across somatic coaching, it was like, oh, this makes sense. It's the body.
Click.
So there was a level of intrigue, curiosity, excitement to want to explore how I
Mm-hmm.
might use my body or how the body might be used in a different way to support people. And that's how it all sort of came together.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing too, is that your story, it was certainly one that had quite a lot of paths, First you started out down this 9 to 5 path, then you gradually veered toward, just trying to learn what it is you were called to do, went to somatic coaching, but then tried figuring your way around some businesses around that same time. I think it's indicative of what a lot of people's stories really are if you break down the exact origins. Very few people have this exact A to B path where it's just, okay, I was here, I fought this, then boom, I was here, I fought
Mm,
this, did this, and I was done. So I'd say your story is just a great example of that too, because, under no circumstance would have anybody thought you would have just went from where you were at, back when you were working the 9 to 5 to a somatic coach who now is going through this whole process of helping others, overcome their own mental and physical burdens. So I'd
mm,
say that's another thing too that really inspired me with your story is that even though it's never point A to B, you will eventually find your point B. You just gotta discover, you gotta learn, you gotta test out a lot of things that won't work at first, but eventually you'll find your way to where you need to be, where you're truly called.
Yeah, I agree, man. I definitely agree. I couldn't have mapped my path out to a T many
Mm-hmm.
years ago. It just wouldn't have happened. And Steve Jobs, I always think about this quote, what he shared
Mm-hmm.
about connecting the dots backwards. It's only when you look back retrospectively to see where you were in relation to where you are now that you can
Mm-hmm.
start to pinpoint the moments where you're like, oh, okay, well that's why that happened. And it probably didn't make sense to you at that time when you was going through it. Like when I was going through the court stuff, I was like, why am I going through this? Like, this was never the plan in my head. There I
Of
was
course.
going through that, very, very emotionally challenging, mentally as well, but
Mm-hmm.
like emotionally challenging. And so, yeah, I agree with you. It's hardly ever a straight path A to B. It's all of this. People
Mm-hmm.
see maybe you at point A, and then when
Mm-hmm.
you get to point B, or maybe in between A to C, you get to B. But often it's a windy path, and people
Of
don't see
course.
that. You know, they don't see the challenges, the obstacles, the diversions, the backtracks to kind of go back to the beginning, to, or at least feel that you're going back to the beginning.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, it's a continuation. It's non-linear.
Of course, yeah, that's really how old growth is. You never really go on this direct path. There's a lot of gurus who will tell you you're going to go from $0 a month to $10,000 a month, but really it's more like, okay, I'm going to cut around this way, go around, and eventually I'll end up there, but maybe a little bit different. So I'd say you captured that pretty well. It's never completely linear. And something else too is that when it comes to somatic coaching itself, what is the number one problem that most of your clients face? Because I was curious too, because, there's a lot of different issues that, people will face, whether it be with imposter syndrome, burnout. But really, what is the number one problem you find your clients facing on a day-to-day basis?
This has been top of mind for a while. And what I'm leading to believe at the moment
Mm-hmm.
is that a lot of the challenges, myself included, and those that I've worked with, the creative entrepreneurs that are building their one person business, stems from a point of fear. And not fear in the sense of, well, I'm just really scared and you're aware of that, but something else that's beneath the surface, I feel, is related to fear. And the reason I say that is because if there was no fear, I believe all of us would do so many different things,
Of course.
right? We would go forward and we would jump. We would apply for that job. We would speak to that guy or girl. We would put ourselves in rooms that we might think are uncomfortable, but because we haven't got that fear associated with doing that new thing, we would do it. And I feel ultimately that's what it comes down to. Also self doubt. Self doubt is a big thing. But again, I think there's always a fear there as well. What
Mm-hmm.
the doubt can be attached to the fact of fearing that this thing that I'm doing won't work. So you've got
Mm-hmm.
the self doubt, but beneath that, you've got the fear that it won't work. Or what I've been speaking about recently in conversations is the fear that it will work,
Mm-hmm.
the fear
Of
of
course.
success. Because what often comes with the fear of success is also a letting go of something, a grieving, a change of
Mm-hmm.
identity. Because what got you here isn't always going to get you there. And so there could be a fear, my circles are going to change. My friends won't see me
Of
in the
course.
same way that they did before. I'm going to have
Mm-hmm.
to speak differently or approach people differently, or what might people think of me? Your identity is being challenged as you start to achieve your level of success. And
Mm-hmm.
I say your level because everyone's levels of success looks different,
Of
or
course.
achievement, your level, the things that you've achieved. And I've experienced it myself where, friends in my circle, there was just this feeling that I felt they thought I was better than them in some way, shape, or form.
Mm.
And that's never been the case. I've never felt better than anybody in that sense. But that was also related to the growth journey that I'd been still on, and that
Mm-hmm.
I'd been on at the time. I was growing and I'm seeing things differently. So I'm not wanting to do the things that I may have been doing before, or I'm putting boundaries in place because I want to protect my time, my energy, my peace.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm met with sort of this feeling of, well, how is that going to be received on the other end? So yeah, I would say that there's always an element of fear that working with individuals where they're the ones holding themselves back. We we
Of course.
we, we, we all hold ourselves back a lot from from working at our potential. However,
Mm-hmm.
we're not always aware of it, and that's where
Mm-hmm.
I support by
Of
asking
course.
questions, by leaning in, by noticing the body
Mm-hmm.
adjustments of the individual I'm working with, by noticing how I'm
Mm-hmm.
feeling in my body in
Of
relation to the
course.
conversation that I'm having, to support self inquiry for the individual, to
Mm-hmm.
ask those questions that may not have been asked before, or they
Of
may have been
course.
too scared to ask because they didn't really want the answer. But again, on an
Mm-hmm.
intellectual level, or should I say on a conceptual level,
Mm-hmm.
they weren't aware of that. But the body always knows.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean that's what's wonderful about the more I'm thinking about somatic coaching too is that really it's never just about fixing the surface level problems that are like, oh, you're too scared to, get out of bed or anything like that. Because each type of coaching has its own place, but I'd say somatic coaching, when it comes to those really deep kind of fixes where it's more than just, getting past procrastination, getting past whatever issue it may be, self doubt, but really getting past those deep inside issues are more than just, well, yeah, I don't feel like working today. It's certainly a wonderful elixir for that, I must say. The more that I
Mm.
hear about it, the more I hear about it from you, hear you explain it. And something I want to ask too is, what is the biggest change you see in your clients once you guide them through this process? How do they behave compared to how they were before?
The shifts, the thing is, transformation is not, a one-stop shop, right? So there can be, and most of the time, there is shifts in a session. Sometimes before we've even got to the
Mm-hmm.
end of the session, in the first 20 minutes, there could be profound shifts taking place, and then we
Mm-hmm.
integrate those shifts in the session. When I say integrate, what I mean is, really allowing those new insights to become embodied actions. So, what are you
Mm-hmm.
taking away from this conversation? How might you implement that into your life? Now that you know this compared to where we were before, what might you do differently? So, really applying those insights on an embodied level. And there may be some tools and
Mm-hmm.
exercises that I would invite the client to explore again, to really sit in with that, because someone who isn't the most confident, they might be sitting quite slouched, and that can just be even in a conversational setting. Their
Mm-hmm.
posture would be indicative of how they are feeling. Their state and the story that they're telling themselves is embodied. So there would be those shifts, and I've seen it, and it's beautiful just to see how someone almost blossoms from where they may have been in the beginning of the session.
Of
you
course.
know,
Mm-hmm.
how they might even become a bit more slower in their speech because they now feel more safe to explore challenging topics that they had otherwise not explored before. So they may have come into the session and it's kind of like, I'm very overwhelmed and there's so many things going on, and I might just invite them, you know, might it be valuable for you just to take a moment just to ground yourself and to settle?
Yeah.
And even that alone is a helpful shift, because on a nervous system level, when we're in, these heightened states, this fight and flight, which is commonly known,
Mm-hmm.
because we're not feeling safe, we're therefore not open to receive, because we're not in that creative mode. So you think about fight or flight. If you feel that there's a threat, you're not thinking about being creative. You're thinking about running.
Of course.
You're thinking about protecting yourself. And therefore, there's that disconnect, right? And that
Mm-hmm.
isn't only, taking place in the wild, it's inbuilt
Mm-hmm.
in us. And so when we feel unsafe in environments, for instance, if this conversation was to feel unsafe, I would be likely, it's not, I feel real safe, but
Of
it's
course.
likely that I wouldn't be open to
Mm-hmm.
express because I don't feel comfortable. And there could be many things going on in my head if that was the case.
Exactly.
Fear of judgment, what are they thinking, all of these sort of things like that. So yeah, I would say that the most profound shifts are often subtle. It's more so the stacking of the shifts that is like, wow, like what if I've worked with
Interesting.
someone for a period of weeks, months, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
and reflect on where they were before, constantly doubting
Mm-hmm.
themselves, wanting to take action, but not because there was some sort of reason, an excuse behind why. Then to see or receive a message and be like, okay, Mike, I'm going to do this. Okay, cool. And then the next day they've done it. It's like you've changed, you've grown, you've
Mm-hmm.
embodied that, you've taken that action. So for me, I would say they're definitely the shifts that I witness, where it's not just, oh, okay, I've made more money. It's like, no, you've put yourself forward to jump on a podcast. 6 weeks ago,
Mm-hmm.
you were too scared to speak publicly, and now you're doing a podcast. It's things
Mm-hmm.
like that. It's the transformation for me really speaks volumes where it can be integrated into your life,
Mm.
not just a thought. Oh yeah, I think I'm a bit more confident. Okay, but how does that show up in your life?
Exactly.
That's the evidence. The evidence is in the experience, right? How you
Of
experienced
course.
something before has now shifted because you've transformed. That's where the evidence is.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what's great about it too, is that, with those gradual shifts, maybe you'll get your first shift about 30 minutes into one coaching session. Maybe it may take a little bit longer before that second one comes, but it's really through that process of just shift after shift where eventually they go from the scared mindset, something that's like, oh, I'm too scared of public speaking. I'm too scared of, really putting my name out there. But like you said, it's not entirely just a business thing, but it's a life kind of transformation where,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't just benefit them with making a higher monthly income or getting more clients, but it's really a matter of how they feel as a person too. Because if they don't have that security in themselves, then what do they have really?
Mm-hmm.
So I'd say that's another wonderful part about what you do is that somatic coaching, it isn't just about business, even though it does help, one person businesses. It's really also about helping the person themselves, making sure that they feel safe in their own body. And something else, since you were talking a lot about self doubt there, are there any other specific strategies you typically use to help address that self doubt within these entrepreneurs?
I wouldn't say there's particular strategies. I have a toolbox of somatic tools and practices
Okay.
that emerge
Mm.
very organically. It's never a case of me coming into a session with a mindset of this is what we're going to do today. None of my
Mm.
sessions are like that. All of my sessions are emergent because that's the nature. Not only is the nature of how we are as individuals, organically things happen. If you've got an itch
Mm-hmm.
on your nose, you know exactly what to do. No one has to tell you to itch your nose. You would itch,
Mm-hmm.
right? So organically, these things emerge. And for me, that is what is so profound. I don't need to come in and say, okay, today we're going to do this, and then no, because where's the space for personal growth? Where's the
Of
space for
course.
empowerment? Where's the space for self-inquiry? It's not there if I'm coming in telling you what to
Mm-hmm.
do. And that's, I
Exactly.
guess, kind of coming back or circling back to what I was saying earlier about how I felt when I entered into this coaching space. It's very vanilla, not really knowing what it is. It's like there's misconceptions, there's myths about what coaching is, and what I see in the
Mm-hmm.
social media space. And I'm still a baby in this. I've still got so much to learn, you know.
Of
But what
course.
I did see and what didn't resonate with me at all was this sense of I'm a coach and I'm going to teach you exactly what I've done. My friend, you're not coaching, you're teaching. Yeah? The coach does not teach you what to do. A coach guides you so that you can find the answers
Mm.
within yourself to know what feels
Interesting.
right for you to do, right? And
Of course.
this, I mean, this is a whole nother podcast, but it's like that. I'm very passionate about that. I'm very passionate
Of
about
course.
clearing up any misconceptions that individuals might have about coaching because coaching is not teaching.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you can coach and you can teach or mentor,
Mm.
maybe in the same session if you figured out a way to do so. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
However, it needs to be clarified to those that are unaware that coach
Mm.
or believe otherwise that coaching is not teaching. Coaching is not about
Mm-hmm.
jumping on a call and the first few minutes you're telling someone what you're going to do in the session.
Mm.
All of my sessions open in a similar way, which is what would you like to explore today? What would you like to
Oh.
focus on in our session? What's alive for you right now? That's where we start.
Of
Why?
course.
Because how I was trained from a person centered perspective, it's not about me. I'm the guide,
Mm-hmm.
I'm the steward, the individual that will support you to guide you deeper within yourself. And so
Mm.
by me asking the question very directly, after we've kind of had a little chit chat, obviously, but yeah, what would you like to focus on today? And they'll bring
Mm.
something. And sometimes they don't. I don't know. I was thinking about this before the session, but I'm not too sure. And then we'll segue. That's
Mm-hmm.
fine. Okay, that's fine. There's nothing coming up for you right now. Tell me about how's your week been. What have you been
Mm.
exploring? Every time something comes up, and that something is the thing to focus on,
Interesting. Okay.
right? So can't remember what your question was. That
No, I love
was
the
my answer.
explanation on it. Of course, yeah. I mean, I love the explanation on it too, because really, so many coaches I feel like have lost that personal touch, that makes coaching such a great thing. Because, like you said, it's so much about, strategy. And I know I've hopped on calls with quite a few coaches where it's just, okay, do this, do this, do that, ask questions later. Right now, you got to implement this strategy at this time. Otherwise, it's not going to work out. But no, that's not how it should be. It should be, like you said, emerging and guiding, just, having a nice, safe space for them to kind of let out what exactly it is that they're thinking about, and then guiding them towards solving that within themselves. And that's the problem. So many coaches have relied on just their own experience, but it's really more about the client. That's the whole purpose of coaching, is that you're not here to share your own agendas with them. You're here to hear their agendas and figure out, okay, why are you thinking that way? And how can we get you to a better place mentally and physically? That's really what it's all about. And I'm glad that, you're embodying that as a somatic coach yourself. And something I wanted to ask you too is, what do you think of the current coaching climate when it comes to, not just on X, but social media as a whole, this whole strategy over client-based mindset that's going on?
I am concerned. Concerned because it just feels so, it just feels like the antithesis of what coaching is.
Mm-hmm.
Again, the whole teaching. And I get it from a business perspective, there's some sense in it, because if you've achieved something and you've created a system of success, a framework, because
Mm-hmm.
you've looked back on your steps and you've been able to, put it, kind of have Lego blocks of what you did, then of course you can package that, because that's golden. You know,
Mm-hmm.
who wouldn't want a step by step playbook to get from their point A to their point B and arrive at
Exactly.
pretty much the same place where, you've positioned yourself as this coach, the
Mm-hmm.
on this pedestal, and you've got the things that somebody wants. Who
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't want that playbook? So I get that. However, for me, it just doesn't feel truly empowering. And
Mm-hmm.
yes, there can be a hybridity with regards to how you do that. Something that I'm figuring out as well. Like kind of
Mm-hmm.
how might I guess the masculine and feminine energy. How might I
Mm-hmm.
have some more structure in what I offer while still allowing space for non-structure and non-doing,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's a dance. It's definitely a dance, one that I'm still trying to learn the steps for. But in terms of the current climate, from what I have seen, I would say there's a handful of individuals who I see their content, I see what they're putting out, and I'm like, yeah, like I would invest in you. And there's a handful of coaches that I've
Mm-hmm.
got on a list who I
Oh.
would want to work with as a coach for me, because I resonate with how they are holding space and what they are guiding
Mm-hmm.
and also teaching as well. It's not to say that I'm against teaching, coaches
Of
teaching. That's
course.
not what I'm saying. I just think that there just needs to be a clear distinction for the client coming in, I guess more
Mm-hmm.
importantly, because if you're coming in with the expectation to be given homework and given everything,
Mm-hmm.
that's okay, because that might be what you need.
Mm-hmm.
But where's the space for all of the other things that you're yearning for? And in fact, that's on one end. On the other end, I feel that there's a
Mm-hmm.
big opening for more heart centered coaches to be of
Mm-hmm.
service. There's a big opening, whether you want to call yourself a coach or a guide, I kind of say it interchangeably.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a big opening for that. Why?
Interesting.
Because I feel people are craving connection. People are
Mm-hmm.
craving to be seen, to be felt, to be understood, to be heard. And if you're coming in like a bull in a china shop and you're ramming strategy down people's throats, you
Mm-hmm.
haven't got that space to connect with the person,
Interesting.
because you're telling them what to do effectively,
Exactly.
and you're expecting them to do what you've told them to do because
Mm-hmm.
they've paid you for that. And if they don't, then you've got a reason to say, well, that's why you haven't achieved what I said you could achieve, because you didn't follow
Mm-hmm.
the steps that I've given you. And so the blame
Interesting.
gets put back on the client rather
Mm-hmm.
than the accountability being taken by the coach,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I've never had that experience. However, I've spoken with a few people in the DMs, like some horror stories where I'm like, wow,
Oh.
I'm sorry that you experienced this, because, you've invested a decent amount of money to work with a coach
Mm-hmm.
or whatever they call themselves, and you've been burnt. And as a result of that, that then further I guess, tarnishes the coaching industry, where people start to steer away from coaches because they don't trust them,
Hmm.
or I don't need a coach because, well, the coach is just going to ask me questions. I want them to give me the answers. It's like, well, that's fine.
Hmm.
If
Of
you want
course.
someone to give you the answers, that's absolutely okay. But we learn through experience, and
Hmm.
of course, people can guide us and show us how to do certain things. But have you ever, figured out something for yourself that you didn't know how to do and felt so empowered because you did it by yourself? Even if someone was slightly guiding you or giving you a little prompt,
Hmm.
I'm sure you could say, yeah, I did that.
Of course.
That's
Hmm.
coaching. That's coaching. Guiding the individual to become more aware of things within themselves so that they
Hmm.
can go on. Like, if you need to be, with the same coach for like 5 years, then on the same thing, then there's a problem. There's
Of
a
course.
problem. Of
Hmm.
course, working with someone long term on various different things, because it's a life thing.
Hmm.
There's not a business thing and a life thing. There is just a thing, and that
Oh.
translates into all areas of your life, right?
Hmm.
How you show up in your business, in your personal life, will reflect in some way, shape, or form how you show up in your business life. If you've got poor boundaries in your personal life, guess what? You're probably going to have poor boundaries as you're building your business.
Hmm.
And that is one thing that I'm really enjoying about my journey of developing my one person business as a coach,
Of
is because it's a mirror, it's a portal. Like,
course.
the more I explore, the more I reveal things to myself. I'm like, oh, damn, I could really work on that. Yeah, I didn't think about that. One of my clients has said something, and that's landed with me as well. It's this, I guess, this sort of ecosystem of, beautiful insights, even if they're
Hmm.
challenging. And sometimes the
Of
most
course.
challenging, insights and conversations are the most profound.
And yeah, I mean, that's what's wonderful about it too, is that I definitely agree with your point, because if you're working with somebody for 5 years on the same issue, clearly you as a coach are just not doing what you're supposed to be doing. You're not guiding them the way that they should be guided. But really, I mean, just helping that person, not just through, okay, yeah, I'm going to make you a better writer, I'm going to make you a better, whatever it may be. Rather, it's about just making you a better person at life as a whole. Because, like you said, I mean, change, it shows in multiple areas. I mean, if you're already setting those good boundaries, if you're confident about yourself, you have good posture whenever you're sitting, whether it be back at home on your sofa, or if it be, at your business, at your desk, you're saying with good posture, then, that change will reflect throughout all areas of your life. It won't just be relegated to one area. And that's what I enjoy about the somatic coaching approach too, is that you aren't really just limiting the change to just one area of your life. What
Mm.
you change within your body will change throughout your business, throughout your life, throughout your friendships, relationships, throughout everywhere. And that's what I really enjoy too. And something I wanted to ask is, really, what are some daily practices that you keep to kind of keep yourself grounded too?
Yeah, that's a great one. So the most consistent, still not every day. There was a point where it was like every day, but the most
Mm-hmm.
consistent practice that I return to is journaling. Like, for
Mm,
me, it's and for me, it's not even a directly related somatic practice. There's ways in that I often do. So bringing my awareness to my surroundings, an orienting exercise, bringing my
of course.
awareness to my surroundings, then bringing my awareness into my body, doing a body scan essentially,
Mm-hmm.
and then I might start writing. But for the most part, journaling, whether that is digitally, which I've
Mm-hmm.
taken a liking to a bit more, but
Mm,
usually it is handwritten
of
expression,
course.
expression, writing down my thoughts. So that's definitely a
Mm-hmm.
practice that I do quite regularly.
Mm,
So somatic shaking. So I've taken to doing that when I'm just boiling the kettle. Don't know how long a kettle boils for, 2 minutes maybe,
mm-hmm.
a minute and a half. Just shaking first thing in the morning, shaking my body, just really, waking up my body, patting myself,
Okay.
feeling myself, and then just bringing my hands to my heart and just feeling the fact that I'm here because my heart is beating, which means
That's
I'm alive
awesome.
and I'm here. Just simple things like
Mm-hmm.
that. There's
Of
more
course.
tools in terms of like where I'm guiding someone, but in terms of
Mm-hmm.
go-to practices, that for sure. And yeah, just bringing awareness to my body throughout the day.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes not as much as other days, but in those moments, just reminding myself, okay, I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed right now. I can just take a
Mm-hmm.
moment excuse me, and just plant my feet, just feel my feet on the ground,
Of
just feel
course.
my body, or just even like I'm on my chair, spinning on my chair, humming. I was at my desk and just humming. The vibration
Mm-hmm.
through your body. I just find it really calming, really soothing. So there's various things that you can do, and there's things that people probably do already, but just don't even
Mm-hmm.
realize. I'd always sort of hummed. My grandma
Mm-hmm.
would always hum while she's cooking, and it's soothing. If you were to
Mm-hmm.
hum to a baby, it's soothing. If you were to, kind of rock, give yourself a hug, self-supportive touch, just feeling where you might benefit from some support in your body. All of those are their practices. They're body-oriented practices.
Interesting. And yeah, like you said about some people doing those things already. I mean, I know I hum when I cook too. I mean, it's just,
Right.
part of kind of relaxing yourself in that way, just kind of, as most people would call it, being in the moment. But it's not just being in the moment, but it's being in touch with yourself too, is
Mm.
what matters too. Because you can be in the moment, but be incredibly stressed at the same time.
Mhm.
But when you're in touch with yourself, you're not stressed, you're calm, you're just kind of taking a moment to realize that you're here, you're living, you're breathing, your heart's beating, and that's wonderful. And you just kind of get to not just be in the moment, but soak up what you're feeling in your head throughout your body. And that's wonderful too. Just taking even just a few minutes every now and then just to do that, to
Mhm.
think about where you're at, how your body's feeling right now, and how you're feeling inclined, what you want to do right now. It's
Mhm.
truly a wonderful little practice. And then moving on to the next little topic here, our final point of discussion is that with all this in mind, now that you've kind of went through your journey before, where you're at now, the practices you do, what are some of your future aspirations as a somatic coach? Where do you want to go next?
Yeah. So for me, it's about really having the foundations laid for me to build my business so that I can be in a position where I'm solely focusing on my business full time, because at the moment I'm still working my
Mm-hmm.
9 to 5 and building alongside that. I also want to do some sort of in person
Mm,
events, somewhere hot. Definitely not here in the UK. Well, not definitely, but probably not.
maybe.
So yeah, some sort of retreats. I do want to do some men's spaces. Whether that's just myself or with some other. It would definitely be other facilitators in some way, shape, or
Mm-hmm.
form. So that's more like how I've seen things and envisioned my practice to develop is, I guess I would say, sort of two streams. One stream being more business related,
Mm,
supporting creative entrepreneurs to build their business from a place of, self trust rather than self doubt. A
mm-hmm.
business that fills their heart and their bank accounts. That's the business side.
Of
The
course.
other stream, I would say, is the more creative side in a sense of dance. As a
Mm.
dancer, whilst I don't dance as much as I used to, my calling, I feel like a calling to be able to support dancers in the space creatively to become more aware of their bodies when they're working with narratives, pieces of work that hold a lot of emotional charge, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
emotional weight, that asks of them to potentially, you know, uproot some traumatic events. I want to go into that space. So for me, I
Of
kind of see my
course.
business playing out in two strands. They definitely will marry and come together in some way, shape, or form because
Mm-hmm.
an independent artist also is an entrepreneur. Whilst they may
Of
not see
course.
that in themselves, they're working for themselves. They're
Mm-hmm.
self-employed. There is an entrepreneurial element behind what
Mm-hmm.
they do, as well as an artistic element. So there definitely would be a crossover, but I feel that there's like two strands that will,
Mm-hmm.
interweave together, and that's where I see, the business, my practice going, speaking, becoming
Mm.
an educator in some sense. Yeah, and then obviously as a result of all of that, my life just developing, traveling, having more time,
Mm-hmm.
connecting with people, meeting people that I've connected with online in real
Mm-hmm.
life. So yeah,
Of
that's
course.
where I kind of see things going.
Yeah, and what I enjoy about the way you take it too, you don't have this strategy where it's like, okay, I need to hit this revenue goal by this month or otherwise I've failed. Or, okay, I need to hit this many clients, this many sales of my product. But really, you accept more of the flow of life because that's how it is. not everything will go exactly as you plan it, no matter how, much budget you allow for in your plans. There's still going to be some things that will go a bit differently than you expected.
Mm,
So I do enjoy how, you explained that, how eventually both rivers will kind of flow together, they'll interconnect. That's really how life ends up being most of the time. It's never this exact black and white, go from point A to point B, 0 to 10,000. It's really more of a winding path. Sometimes there's a roundabout. Sometimes, you make the wrong turn, but then eventually you end up right back where you need to be. And that's
mm.
what's wonderful about life, too. And I'm sure you've experienced that for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. Like there's things I was like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Or I've ended up here where I had an idea,
Mm-hmm.
and the idea that I had and the thing that's actually taken place is different, but it's the same.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's kind of like, let me give an example. Say, for instance, you really want a particular type of food, but you had an
Mm-hmm.
idea of where you could get this food. However, you've now gone to a different restaurant, and there's that plus a whole load of other options for you to choose from. So
Mm-hmm.
whilst you thought you wanted to get pizza, well, you wanted to get pizza and you wanted to go to this specific pizza shop, you went, it was shut. You've gone somewhere else, they have pizza and they have other things. And I feel that
Mm-hmm.
is how elements of my life has turned out. It's like, okay, I've
Got
wanted
it.
this, but I've got this and this, so I've been exposed to more. And I think, yeah, with with the coaching, set
Mm-hmm.
out, I want to build my coaching business. That's what I want to do. Okay,
Of
great. I've
course.
joined on Twitter and now I'm writing a hell of a lot. I never imagined that I'd be writing. I never imagined that I'd be writing a weekly newsletter. I never imagined that people would be reading what I'm writing because, as far as I was concerned, I just want to coach. But as I came into it, I came to realize that in the digital economy, writing is a skill that is needed, or at least
Mm-hmm.
communication, writing being a medium of
Of course.
communication. But people don't know what you do unless you communicate it. And it just so
Mm-hmm.
happens that I found myself in a space where I actually enjoy writing. I always have. I've always enjoyed communicating in some way, shape, or form. And being on X has given me, the reason to write and explore that a lot more.
And yeah, that's what's wonderful too, is that writing is certainly a great talent to have on here because really, although it's no somatic coaching, mind you, it's still wonderful to be able to express yourself, using an exact set of words to really describe how you're feeling, how you want your idea to be shown. And something funny from my own journey as well is that I kind of had the opposite of what you did. I was originally a blogger before I came on to, X. And I'm like, you know what? Along the way, I think I'll become a coach too. I really enjoy helping out people that way. So it's interesting how each of us has our own path of how we come into our own, whether it be
Mm-hmm.
on X or any other platform. But eventually, the flow of life, we end up exactly where we need to be.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always wonderful, isn't it?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Nice. It's fascinating. And more and more,
Mhm.
I'm learning to practice to be in the moment because that's all we have. We don't have the future. The future doesn't
Mhm.
exist in the way that we know it to be,
Of
you know.
course.
And so, spending that energy trying to force the future is the same energy you could use to embrace what's taking place right now in the present moment.
And that's a great line to end off on, I'd say. It was wonderful chatting with you, Mike. I'd say you definitely opened my mind to a lot of somatic coaching because I didn't know a lot about it before. I just knew, okay, it's basically like coaching, except it's more involved with the body, getting in tune with that. But the way you described it, it's something much, much more than that. I was glad to learn about it today, and thank you for coming on. It was, a great honor to be here to talk with you. And thank you to the listeners, too, for listening along. I'm sure they enjoyed what you had to say. You've certainly educated quite a few people about somatic coaching. And with all that said, we'll be ending off the podcast now. If you enjoyed, make sure to leave 5 stars on Spotify and check us out on next Friday. So, with that said, we'll see you around. Bye bye.